In this video, I show you some past gameplay footage of me playing 5 story games back in 2019. Now please note, I was able to play and finish some story games that I recorded from the time frame of June 2019 to May 2020. And played from the time frame of June 2019 up until October 2022, or possibly even later on. More specifically, this is just the first part of me showing you some parts of full story gameplay footage. For the next few days, I will dump some more later footage onto YouTube. So please be on the lookout for that. I just hope that I don't get copyright claim, otherwise I'll take it down. Because I removed the original audio and I've replaced it with this audio I'm recording right now. Anyways, besides the point. Secondly, I would like to take some time to explain the storyline of those 5 games that I'm showing in this video, in chronological order, in case you forgot. So the first game shown in this video is of course the first game of the somewhat recent story game trend, which is of course the first iteration of camping, where you along with 11 other people go on a camping trip, where you explore and see the sights of a secluded forest called Specky Woods. After arriving, you and your peers decide to set up camps and explore for a bit until nightfall, where in that time frame you can look for any item that can benefit you throughout later stages of the story, like for example, umbrellas, lucky coins, and medkits. After nightfall approaches, you and your peers decide to stay for a while at the campfire, until an unidentified monster jump scares everyone. As they all begin to run for safety from the unknown monster from the campfire to the caves, as the tents are deemed unsafe. Minutes after the monster disappears, acid rain begins to fall from the sky. Everyone is now forced to stay inside until the acid rain stopped in the daytime. On the second day, everyone arrives back at the campfire to see the red tent now blown down. After a while of wandering and contemplating, you find a park ranger named Daniel, where he warns you that he placed bear traps across the forest in order to contain the supposed monster threat. He then warns the danger of being in the forest for a brief while. Afterwards, with nowhere else safe to stay, everyone goes and decides to stay inside the cave for a while. Finally realizing they forgot to bring the picnic basket into the cave, one of the people in the group sacrificed their health for the sake of retrieving the basket. Afterwards, everyone else enjoys their small meal, suspicious looking sandwiches. Everyone felt satisfied until realizing one of the people who ate the sandwich was poisoned to death, in which he died from food poisoning. Starting to lose hope, they finally discover a collapsing cave as they slide down one of the paths to safety, while the people who rode on the spiky path either dies or was severely injured. The rest go and escape to safety while either outrunning bears or escaping the quickly flooding and collapsing underground room. Finally, the third day rises as they already begin to lose their marbles, as they call for assistance and rescue. However, they had to wait one more night for the emergency team to arrive. Spending the final day and part of the night contemplating on the disaster, they hear a scream. Now this is where the story begins to diverge into 2 parts. If 2 or more players are still alive, one of them is held captive, tied into a tree, and must be rescued before time runs out in the acid rain as they die. Or if you're the only survivor, nothing happens as you wait inside the tent for the rain to stop. Then you hear an ominous ambient along with dark fog filling up the whole forest. Climbing up to the highest point for safety, you're the only survivor. Nothing happens as you wait inside the tent for the rain to stop. Then you hear an ominous ambient along with dark fog filling up the whole forest. Climbing up to the highest point for safety, you are now in desperate need of help. If the game system says you were the person that poisoned the other player from earlier, the monster ambushes you and finally kills you. Or if someone else committed the murder but died earlier on, the monster will try to harm you but is then stopped from the sudden shift from nighttime to daylight time. The monster then explains his intentions were not to kill the group but to rather save them from a murderer called Zach Nolan. Due to his already concerning state of the forest safety, he gradually loses his sanity. The pack bag then opens to reveal the person who put rat poisoning in the sandwich from earlier. The story then ends with someone being stabbed, unknown if it was the monster or someone else or even you. Then that's where the camping 1 ends. The second story mentioned in this video is where you go on a field trip to a museum where you explore oddly satisfying images and other models of art. Then you and the rest of the group suddenly stumble upon a strange artifact from the Egypt exhibit. Upon entering the room, a strange creature wakes up from his slumber and begins to kill a few tourists. Briefly thinking about what will happen next, suddenly, one of the tourists are trapped in a freezing locker, wrapped around in paper and plastic. That person is either left to die or rescued after a while of searching. While a few minutes beforehand, they try to get back onto the bus, but however it's ruined as the bus is then hijacked, and then some of the people die. Regardless of that person's fate, the rest of the group decides to hunker down for the night until suddenly the power goes out. With the strange creature still lurking around the facility, one of the tourists go and fix the power, bringing back light in the entire museum. Jump scared by the creature, they return to the Egyptian exhibit and confront the creature, where they are forced to either die or return the artifact in the Giza pyramids. The group goes to choose the latter option. The group then goes into the pyramids as some of the people die under lava, while the rest manage to survive while sliding down and doing an obby, until finally going into a maze. Once at the other end of the maze, they are then greeted once more by the creature and thanks them for returning the artifact, and is then warned to never take it back ever again or else they'll meet certain death. The next story game shown in this video is called High School, where you go and return to high school to relive your fondled memories. At first, the teacher decides to take attendance. However, unknowingly, the people mentioned in the roll call were actually the first people to die as the power went out. Regardless, the monster then chases the rest of the students, with most of them surviving. Afterwards, shocked at this situation, they find the claw. They then turn back on the lights and find a key to open the back doors of the school. Right after the doors open, strange fog starts to fill in, where the students have to avoid underground traps and run to the gym for safety. After a while, the rest of the group gets back into the school to have lunch, in which they haven't had for quite a long time. Afterwards, you return back to the gym entrance to further investigate the already worsening situation. Power goes out again as the monster comes back for a few seconds, and then suddenly disappears, once again. The rest of the group goes to turn back on the power and finds a key to unlock the room, where you and the rest go into brightly glowing lights under the extremely dark night. While beforehand, you come across a maintenance room that you have to escape to the top as the fog fills again. After finally escaping and about to enter the bus, the teacher, now revealed to be a monster, stops you right before re-entering the bus. The story in that version abruptly ends, although I don't deny that there is a second part to the story that I don't quite remember, so I'll skip that for now. Anyways, regardless, the next story game shown in this video is called Tiki Island, where I accidentally killed myself in the middle of the story, but I still survived in later attempts as I completed the game. In that game, to be specific, that's when I finally learned the invisible platform trick in the obby section. So basically, here's how the story goes. You go on a field trip to a tribal island, where the natives welcome you as tourists at first, as the tourist group decides to dance together with the natives until nightfall, where everyone decides to sleep. However, hearing a scream, you at first try to rescue the female guide, but then resort to attempting to leave. Betraying the tourists, the natives began to show hostility as you then climb up the tree to avoid death. The natives then suddenly leave, as you and the other remaining guide decide to throw the natives into the volcano. But actually, you didn't. After a while of thinking, you then traverse through lava and several other traps in between. Narrowly avoiding a mudslide, you finally make it to the top of the volcano, confronting the now brainwashed female guide, instantly betraying the rest of the group. Narrowly escaping death, you wake up, now at the shore this time. This time, you try again to get back to the bus, but you are suddenly interrupted by the puppet master, who oversees and terrorizes the island by controlling them. You are then forced to enter the puppet master's realm, completing a maze and an obby. briefly jump scared by the puppet master's mask. You are then teleported to a course where you have to dodge bombs and land on the color said by the puppet master, until he finally realizes your strength and lets you go, but to only come across the two guides trapped in the cage. Choosing either one gives different endings. Tying the vote or choosing nothing will either leave you trapped for eternity in the realm, or finally letting you escape into freedom. Finally, the last story game shown in this video is called Overnight, which was formerly called Sleepover, where you are invited to a friend's home, very far away from the rest of society. At first, you and your friends seem to enjoy the party for a while, until power suddenly cuts off, as a strange creature enters the home and terrorizes the guests. After a while, your friend turns back on the power. With everyone else seemingly scared, he tries to reassure everyone that everything was okay. He then orders peanut butter pizza as everyone ate it all. Everything seemed normal until one of the people complained that they were allergic to peanut butter. Upon finding the medkit, the person either dies or is saved ASAP. Time passes for a while again as your friends and the guests decide to finally get some sleep. However, the lights flicker again as the friend tries to fix the power again, but then suddenly disappears without a trace. Nearly an hour passes and the friend still hasn't returned, so one of the people go to sacrifice their health for the sake of restoring power. As the power is finally restored, you then find a monster again, which turns back off the power for the third time, and you go and storm out of the house, in terms of being scared and not angry. You and your group initially thinks about getting back into the bus. However, the bus is flinged away as it then disappears, with nothing else to do. With nothing else to do, you and your group finally goes into the basement to find the friend. Upon entering, you are in the storage room, where you find a crowbar to break down the door. Afterwards, you go through an obby, avoiding the bottomless dark pit. You then find your friend again, but is then taken away from the monster after seeing him for a few seconds. You then go after the monster, falling through several minutes to even hours of walking into dark corridor abysses, until you finally get into a door where you break down with the crowbar from earlier. Now entering a maze, you then wander around for a bit until finally finding a large and important door, which leads you to your friend finally. However, poignantly possessed by the monster who is on top of the room. Your now possessed friend stares and talks to you in a menacing way until finally leaving in obscurity. Daytime finally approaches when your friend repeats the same line, talked by your earlier friend. The story then ends. With all these plot lines aside, I am aware of the fact that most of these story games died off very quickly as the trend of making obbies, fighting bosses, and more ridiculous storylines began to die off as a fad. Some of these games were very well structured while the rest were not. By the way, I might make another video where I may explain the story of an earlier story game that has long existed before camping, that some of you remember, called A Night at a Hotel, so be on the lookout for that. Now finally, in case you were wondering, these clips were originally recorded between the time frame of June 10, 2019 to July 4th, 2019. Now finally, goodbye for now.